I've seen my fair share of movie villains, some loud and theatrical, others cold and calculated, but none have stuck with me, quite like the one hiding in investigation of a citizen above suspicion. I came across this 1970 Italian film almost by accident, not expecting much beyond a political thriller. What I got instead was a quiet punch to the gut. The main character, a high-ranking police officer, commits a brutal crime in the opening minutes. And what follows isn't a whodunit, but a chilling unraveling of how power protects itself. There's something deeply unsettling about how calm, even smug, he remains as he dares the system to hold him accountable. Watching it, I realized I wasn't just seeing a man go mad with authority. I was watching a system that was built to let him get away with it. It's a film that got under my skin. And I honestly believe the villain at its center deserves far more recognition. The film was released in 1970 during a period of intense political instability known in Italy as the Years of Lead, when terrorism, corruption, and abuse of power were part of daily public discourse. The story centers on a nameless, high-ranking police inspector who, on the very day he's promoted to lead the homicide division, coldly murders his mistress in her apartment. But what happens next is what makes this film so intriguing. He doesn't try to cover it up. In fact, he practically begs to be caught. He leaves footprints on the floor, smears fingerprints, pulls a thread from his necktie, and hooks it deliberately on the nail of the victim. It's not clumsy, it's theatrical, as if every clue is a message. It's ironic that he's the one to oversee the very investigation of the murder he committed, feeding colleagues misleading theories, subtly redirecting suspicion to other people, even openly suggesting that they consider him a suspect. And yet, no one dares to. As a viewer, you're thrown into this bizarre psychological spiral. Why would someone do this? Is he trying to confess? Is it guilt? Is he mentally unraveling? Or is there something more sinister at play? You start to ask yourself, is he a psychopath playing a sick game? But the more obvious he becomes, the more the system goes out of its way to excuse him. Watching it unfold, I realized the film wasn't interested in the classic moral conflict of good versus evil. It was showing what happens when the two are indistinguishable in the hands of those in power. There's almost a Kafkaesque tone throughout, where the rules seem twisted not by chaos, but by obedience. Watching it now, I couldn't help but think, this was never just about Italy. It was, and still is, about anywhere institutions become more interested in protecting themselves than in serving the truth. What makes the inspector in investigation of a citizen above suspicion so unnerving is how composed and magnetic he is. He doesn't rant or rage. He speaks with quiet confidence, often even charm. There's a certain charisma in the way he carries himself, a smug certainty in his voice that makes people listen. I found myself leaning in whenever he talked, not because I agreed with him, but because he spoke like a man who believed he was always right and knew the world would agree. He's not a typical movie villain. There's no mask, no alter ego, no descent into madness. His evilness is rooted in structure, in uniform, rank, and bureaucracy. He walks through each scene, with the assuredness of someone who knows the rules don't apply to him. What makes it even more disturbing is that he's completely aware of how absurd the situation is. At times, it almost feels like he's playing a game with the audience and everyone around him, leaving clues, hinting at his guilt, daring anyone to challenge him. But they don't. They can't. His authority is too deeply ingrained in the system. What really stayed with me was how easily he switches between personas. He can be cold and clinical one moment, then almost fatherly or persuasive the next. He lectures his subordinates with conviction, quoting ideology and morality, all while knowing he's committed a brutal murder. There's no struggle, no hesitation. It's this contradiction, his ability to be both composed and completely corrupt, that makes him so compelling. For much of the film, he operates with terrifying composure, treating murder like a political experiment, an act of control, a philosophy, of power. But as the days pass and no one questions him, despite planting evidence, confessing indirectly, and leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, he begins to unravel. And then comes the pivotal moment. He surrenders himself, not out of guilt in the traditional sense, but out of desperation, a need to be recognized as guilty. Not because he regrets the murder, but because the idea that the system would protect him, no matter what, becomes too grotesque to bear. Even for him. He turns himself in, confronts his superiors, and in one of the film's most haunting sequences, insists on being held accountable. Yet even this moment is laced with psychological ambiguity. Is it an act of repentance, a twisted cry for validation, or a final furious attempt to prove that authority is so absolute, even a confessed killer in its ranks cannot be touched? This inner implosion, quiet, controlled, and chilling, gives him disturbing complexity. He is not ruled by emotion, but he is not void of it. His villainy is shaped by repression, delusion, and a mind slowly folding in on itself. We're not meant to pity him, but we are meant to study him. By ending the film in a haze of uncertainty, director Elio Petri reflects the very paradox of power the inspector sought to illuminate. After the inspector turns himself in, we see what appears to be his reckoning, a tense interrogation inside his home, where his confession finally triggers judgment from the system he once served. It's charged, surreal, almost cathartic. At last, the truth seems poised to break through the institutional walls. But then it fractures. It was a dream. He wakes up, alone. And only then do the commissioner and his colleagues actually arrive at his apartment, stepping in, silent, unreadable. The moment we've been waiting for, will justice finally be served? Hangs in the air. And then, the screen cuts to black. There is no answer, no verdict. No resolution. Instead, we're left with a quote from Franz Kafka. Whatever impression he makes on us, he is a servant of the law, so he belongs to the law and escapes human judgment. We don't know if he is arrested, silenced, or embraced again by the system. By showing us this dream of punishment, only to pull it away, the film reinforces the terrifying idea that the inspector is not judged, because he cannot be. As Kafka suggests, he belongs to the law. He is the system, and thus, he escapes not just accountability, but even humanity. There's nothing glamorous about his evilness, and that might be exactly why people overlook him. We're used to villains who entertain us, who challenge heroes in explosive ways, who demand our attention. But this inspector doesn't want to be a spectacle. He wants to be believed, obeyed, and above all, unquestioned. I also think the film's political context plays a role in how often this villain gets left out of the mainstream conversation. It's a foreign language film rooted in 1970s Italian politics, which might make it seem distant or niche at first glance. But that distance is deceptive. The themes, abuse of power, institutional loyalty, moral blindness, are still painfully relevant. It's just that this story doesn't wrap itself in familiar genre tropes. There's no clear arc of justice or downfall. If we're looking for villains in cinema, maybe it's time we stop searching for the loudest, flashiest monsters and start paying attention to the quiet ones in positions of authority, the ones who smile, who speak with certainty, and who never expect to be judged. Because sometimes the most dangerous villain is the one who knows he won't be.